Have you ever found yourself judging a book solely by its cover? Is a simple outfit or a particular skin tone enough for you to label someone, to place them neatly into a preconceived box? If your answer is yes, pause and consider. Sometimes the person you are quick to dismiss, quick to cast aside, holds a power, a value you could never have anticipated. This story is a poignant reminder of that truth, beginning on a day that seemed ordinary enough, in an opulent place in the heart of New York City. It's a tale that challenges our assumptions, forces us to look deeper, and reveals that what appears on the surface is rarely the whole picture. Brace yourself for a journey into the hidden depths of judgment and worth. The shimmering light from the luxury boutiques cast a polished sheen upon the gleaming marble floor. Westbridge Plaza, one of New York's most exclusive shopping complexes, hummed with the vibrant rhythm of modern life. Hurried footsteps, cheerful chatter, and the rustle of colorful shopping bags created a familiar scene of bustling activity. The air itself seemed to carry the subtle scent of expensive perfumes and the promise of material indulgence. Amidst this opulent canvas, a young man moved at a deliberate, unhurried pace. Marcus, 17 years old, stood out precisely because he didn't seem to fit in. He wore a faded black hoodie, worn jeans, and carried a simple backpack slung over one shoulder. This was not the typical attire one saw here. He wasn't heading directly for any particular store. He simply ambled past the large glass display windows, his eyes curious yet notably devoid of longing or envy. He paused before a display of incredibly expensive watches, a faint, almost knowing smile touching his lips as if viewing something interesting, before continuing on. His posture was relaxed, almost serene, as though he were observing a world he either didn't belong to, or perhaps belonged to in a way no one here could possibly guess. From a distance, a watchful gaze had fixated on Marcus. Sergeant Dawson, a middle-aged police officer around 50, with flecks of gray in his hair and a face etched with sternness, even a degree of hardened cynicism. His pale skin seemed to accentuate the contrast with Marcus' complexion in his own eyes. Dawson leaned against a pillar, arms crossed over his chest, his eyes continuously tracking the teenager movements. There was something about Marcus' presence, his calm demeanor in this setting, that grated on Dawson, an invisible but potent sense of unease. After several minutes of silent observation, Dawson decided to act. He straightened up and walked purposefully towards Marcus, his posture radiating authority and a palpable sense of suspicion. "Hey kid!" Dawson's voice was low, gruff, and heavy with thinly veiled distrust. "What are you looking for in here?" Marcus turned, his calm gaze meeting the hostile look in the officer's eyes. He offered a small, polite shake of his head. "Just looking, sir," he replied, his voice quiet and respectful. "Looking?" Dawson sneered, his eyes sweeping dismissively from the faded hoodie to the simple backpack. "In a place like this? You got money to buy anything here." Dawson's words were like an invisible slap, aimed not just at Marcus but at anyone whose appearance didn't scream wealth or privilege in this high-end sanctuary. The question wasn't really a question. It was an accusation disguised as one. Marcus maintained his surprising composure. "I know, sir. I just wanted to look around." But Dawson wasn't interested in explanations. The mismatch between Marcus' appearance and the location was enough for him to pass judgment. "I've seen you loitering for a while now," Dawson said, his voice hardening. He reached for the radio clipped to his belt. "Security, this is Sergeant Dawson. Got a suspicious individual." "I'm not doing anything wrong," Marcus interrupted, his voice still calm but a flicker of hurt momentarily crossing his eyes. "Quiet!" Dawson barked, his face tightening. "Suspicious behavior. Possible shoplifting. I have the right to ask you to leave the premises." Mall security guards, alerted by Dawson's radio call, quickly converged, their eyes narrowing as they sized up Marcus. They mirrored Dawson's scrutinizing gaze, treating the teenager as if he were an obvious threat. A small crowd of shoppers began to gather, their faces a mixture of curiosity and cold detachment. Their eyes lingered on Marcus, their expressions judgmental, implicitly siding with the authority figure based solely on the scene unfolding before them. Some shoppers edged away, as if the mere proximity to the accused teenager might somehow tarnish them. Marcus stood there, trapped in the circle of suspicion and prejudice. He knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't the first time. It wasn't just about him, it was about his skin color, about the clothes he was wearing. Despite the complete lack of any evidence of wrongdoing, he was being treated like a criminal. He didn't argue, didn't plead. Marcus simply held Dawson's gaze for a long moment. His eyes conveyed no hatred, but rather a deep, weary understanding of the nature of prejudice, mixed with sadness and a quiet dignity. Then, he did something that made Dawson pause slightly. He reached into his pocket, not for a weapon or to resist, but to pull out a smartphone, the latest model, a stark contrast to his otherwise humble attire. He typed rapidly, his lips pressed into a thin line. The act was deliberate, measured. Then, without another word, Marcus turned and walked away, moving calmly through the whispering, staring crowd. He didn't rush, didn't look back. His departure was silent, dignified, despite the public humiliation. To the onlookers, this was just a minor incident. A suspicious-looking black teenager being escorted out of an upscale mall by a police officer. Something sadly commonplace in a society riddled with assumptions. They had no idea that this wasn't the end. This was just the first piece of a far more complex puzzle. A puzzle about power, prejudice, and the true cost of judging a book by its cover. The scene they witnessed was merely the surface. The truth lay hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. In the dimly lit security office, filled with the stale smell of old coffee and the static crackle of walkie-talkies, the men in uniform were unwinding after their shifts. An air of casual self-satisfaction hung in the room, as one of them recounted his handling of a situation earlier that morning. This mundane setting, so different from the polished luxury above, was where the real, unfiltered thoughts about who belonged and who didn't were openly expressed. It was the operational heart of Westbridge Plaza, a stark contrast to the glittering facade presented to the public. Metal desks cluttered with monitors displaying grainy camera feeds, filing cabinets overflowing, and a general sense of weariness permeated the space. Sergeant Dawson sat perched on the edge of a worn chair, sipping from a foam cup, a smug expression plastered across his face. "You know what?" he began, his voice loud and booming, drawing the attention of the other officers present. Some shuffling papers, others scrolling on their phones. "I handled some kid this morning." A younger officer, slumped in a swivel chair, smirked. "Another suspicious individual. Sarge?" "You bet your ass," Dawson replied, slapping his thigh emphatically. Little punk, dressed like a beggar, lurking around the watch section. Shifty eyes. Soon as I saw him, I knew exactly what type he was. He paused for dramatic effect, taking another slow sip of his coffee, savoring the moment. Came right up to him and asked questions. He started getting evasive. gave him the third degree, called for backup, had the guards escort him right off the premises. That kind of trash just dirties the place for the real customers. His fellow officers chuckled, nodding along in easy agreement. Their faces, some tired, some bored, lit up with a shared sense of camaraderie built on mutual assumptions. Part clarification. Yeah, Sarge, one officer chimed in, leaning forward. You can always spot him, just casing the joint. Exactly, Dawson boasted, puffing out his chest slightly. These young black kids, wearing those baggy clothes, look exactly like the types I've busted for shoplifting before. Saves us trouble down the line just getting rid of them right away. They continued their banter, exchanging knowing glances and reinforcing each other's prejudices. For them, removing a teenager who looked out of place was not just justified. It was a standard procedure, a small victory in maintaining the perceived order and exclusivity of the high-end mall. They genuinely believed they were performing their duties commendably, filtering out the undesirable elements. They were completely oblivious that their casual racism and arrogant assumptions had just set the stage for a dramatic, life-altering consequence that would arrive sooner than they could possibly imagine. The incident was, in their eyes, closed and forgotten, filed away as just another routine stop. But the universe, it seemed, had a different filing system. But that atmosphere of smug complacency, of routine prejudice, was not destined to last. A piece of unexpected news was about to crash down upon them like a thunderbolt, shifting the ground beneath their feet and changing the focus from small-time, suspicious individuals to million-dollar deals and seismic corporate shifts. The quiet confidence born of their perceived authority was about to be shattered by the sheer force of global finance. Part storytelling. The staff meeting the following morning began with a forced air of normalcy. Employees gathered in a sterile conference room, the polished table reflecting the fluorescent lights overhead. No one anticipated that the routine agenda was about to be hijacked by an announcement of monumental importance. The mall director, a middle-aged man named Mr. Henderson, stood nervously at the podium, clutching a stack of documents, his hands trembling slightly. "Good morning, everyone," Mr. Henderson began, his voice dry and strained. "I have a very important announcement to make." A hush fell over the room. Everyone leaned in, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension on their faces. "As most of you are aware," he continued, swallowing hard, "business performance has seen some volatility recently." Dawson, seated towards the back with the other security staff, furrowed his brow. Business performance? What did that have to do with him? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Consequently, the director cleared his throat, his eyes scanning the document in his hands. "Oak Ridge Holdings has completed the acquisition of Westbridge Plaza in its entirety." A collective murmur rippled through the room. Oak Ridge Holdings? The name itself commanded respect, even awe. One of the largest real estate and investment conglomerates in the country. They had bought this place? Mr. Henderson held up the document, his voice barely above a whisper as he delivered the staggering figure. The value of the transaction, $240 million US. A wave of stunned silence washed over the room, quickly followed by a flurry of hushed whispers and wide-eyed exchanges. $240 million. The sheer magnitude of the number was incomprehensible to most of them. Questions flew silently between colleagues. What did this mean? Would there be layoffs? Who would be in charge now? Mr. Henderson tapped the microphone lightly, trying to regain control. "Please, everyone, settle down. This is the official press release. He began to read aloud, his voice now distinctly shaky. Oak Ridge Holdings will proceed with a complete restructuring of the management system. The new operating representative will be arriving to inspect the premises later today. The news hit the staff like a physical blow. A complete management overhaul? Who was this new representative? Every eye in the room seemed to instinctively turn towards the door leading to the VIP elevators, the only entrance befitting such a high-powered figure, waiting for the arrival of the mysterious new boss. Dawson, along with the others, felt a knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. A change of this magnitude was bound to impact their jobs, their routines, perhaps even their very presence here. Yet, absorbed in the corporate drama, he still hadn't connected this seismic event to the kid he had dismissed the previous day. The focus was entirely on the incoming power, not recognizing that the face of that power was one he had already seen and contemptuously discarded. The pieces were there, but they had yet to click into place. The soft chime of the elevator cut through the thick anticipation in the meeting room, severing the tension built by the announcement. And the person who stepped out into the room caused time itself to stop for everyone present, delivering the plot twist that no one, especially Sergeant Dawson, could have possibly foreseen. Expectations were about to be not just met, but violently upended. The familiar ding of the VIP elevator resonated through the silent conference room. All eyes swiveled towards the polished metal doors, expecting to see a seasoned business executive, perhaps a man of distinguished age and bearing, or a woman radiating formidable power. But the person who emerged, it was Marcus. Gone was the faded black hoodie and worn jeans. This time, Marcus was clad in a perfectly tailored suit that seemed to fit him like a second skin. He stood tall, his posture erect, carrying an air of quiet confidence and unexpected authority. By his side were two assistants, dressed in sharp, professional attire, holding briefcases. Trailing slightly behind them was a small group of others, looking very much like high-level lawyers or corporate advisors. The entire room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Not a single sound could be heard except perhaps the frantic beating of their own hearts. Faces that moments before were filled with anxiety or curiosity were now masks of pure shock. They stared at Marcus, then at his suit, then at the entourage accompanying him, then back at him again, their minds struggling to process the impossible information their eyes were relaying. Dawson, still seated in the back row, gaped. His jaw went slack. He literally rubbed his eyes, as if waking from a bizarre dream. The kid he'd kicked out yesterday? How could this be happening? How could that be him? Marcus walked into the room, his gaze sweeping calmly over the faces frozen in various stages of disbelief. His eyes settled on Dawson, a long, steady look that held no malice, but a profound sense of recognition. Marcus moved deliberately to the center of the room, near where the mall director, Mr. Henderson, stood as if rooted to the spot. He turned to face the assembled staff, his expression unreadable but his presence undeniable. He addressed Dawson directly, his voice clear and steady, lacking any hint of anger or triumph, just the simple weight of truth. "Do you remember me, sir?" Marcus asked, his voice cutting through the silence. Dawson stammered, his face draining of all color. He was visibly trembling. You, what are you doing here?" A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Marcus's lips. It wasn't a smile of mockery, but perhaps one acknowledging the sheer, improbable irony of the moment. "I am the son of Mr. Malcolm Ryder," Marcus replied, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room, every word landing like a stone in the pool of stunned silence. The chairman of Oak Ridge Holdings. A collective gasp echoed through the room. The chairman of Oak Ridge? This kid was his son? The information was too staggering, too contradictory to the image they had held of him just hours before. Marcus continued, his gaze still fixed on the now pale and shaking Dawson, who looked ready to collapse. And now, Marcus stated, his voice firm and final, I am in charge of this entire project. Westbridge Plaza is under my direct management. The air in the room became heavy, thick with the weight of this revelation. The seemingly minor incident of racial profiling had exploded into a dramatic confrontation, where the teenager who was publicly humiliated the day before now held absolute power over the fate of the very man who had humiliated him. The dramatic revelation had reached its zenith, but Marcus didn't choose the predictable path of immediate retribution. His decision demonstrated a depth of understanding and a capacity for grace that few could have anticipated, delivering a profound lesson to everyone in that room about the true nature of power and consequence. This was not about vengeance, it was about change. The stunned silence that followed Marcus's announcement hung heavy in the conference room, stretched thin by the sheer impossibility of the situation. Sergeant Dawson sat paralyzed, looking utterly defeated and terrified. He was a man stripped bare of his perceived authority, exposed in his prejudice, and facing the immediate, unpredictable wrath of someone he had callously wronged. The fear radiating from him was palpable. Marcus, in stark contrast, remained calm, his composure unwavering amidst the emotional turmoil he had ignited. There was no anger in his eyes, no triumphant smirk. Only a quiet authority and a look that suggested he had seen this scene play out in various forms many times before. He addressed one of his assistants, his voice even and controlled. Please, Marcus requested, his tone polite yet firm. Display the security footage from yesterday's incident on the main screen again. All eyes in the room turned towards the large display. The video from the Westbridge Plaza security cameras began to play, recounting the events that had transpired less than 24 hours earlier. The narrative was starkly different when viewed with the knowledge of Marcus' true identity. They watched the teenager in the simple clothes moving with quiet dignity. They saw Sergeant Dawson approach, his face contorted with suspicion and disdain, his voice harsh and accusatory. They witnessed the baseless interrogation, the accusation of suspicious behavior without a shred of evidence. They saw Marcus stand alone, surrounded by the judging eyes of the indifferent crowd and the complicit mall security. They saw him take out his phone, type a quick message, and then quietly, silently, walk away. As the footage ended, the silence in the room was even more profound than before. The images lingered, stark and accusatory. Dawson sat hunched over, unable to meet anyone's gaze, the color completely drained from his face. Shame, fear, and perhaps a dawning, horrible realization flickered in his eyes. The other staff members shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Marcus's gaze, suddenly seeing their own complicity in the system that allowed such casual injustice to occur. Marcus stood observing them for a long moment. His eyes scanned their faces, reading the mix of shock, embarrassment, and nascent understanding. He stepped forward, his presence filling the space. He addressed not just Dawson, but everyone in the room, his voice measured and thoughtful. I've reviewed this footage several times, Marcus began, his voice clear. And one thing is unequivocally clear to me. Mr. Dawson, you did not see a person. You only saw a stereotype. You only saw your own prejudice projected onto someone based on the color of their skin and the clothes they were wearing. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle upon them. I could fire you, Mr. Dawson, Marcus stated, his voice calm, listing the immediate, obvious consequence everyone expected. Based on this clear misconduct, the biased treatment, the false accusations made without cause. It would be easy. It would be a clean break. A collective intake of breath could be heard. Was this it? The swift, decisive end to Sergeant Dawson's career? Dawson himself flinched, bracing for the final blow. But I'm not going to fire you, Mr. Dawson, Marcus said. A wave of surprise, murmurs, and confusion rippled through the room. Dawson looked up, his eyes wide with disbelief and confusion. Instead, Marcus continued, his voice firm, outlining a consequence far more insightful and potentially transformative than simple dismissal. I want you to work here, right here at Westbridge Plaza. Dawson's brow furrowed. Work? Doing what, sir? He stammered, still reeling. Every single day, Marcus stated clearly, explaining the nature of his unconventional sentence. You will stand right in front of the main entrance of this shopping center, wearing your security uniform. Dawson's eyes widened further. Standing at the entrance? Like a doorman? A greeter? The public nature of it struck him. Your job, Marcus clarified, leaving no room for misinterpretation, is to greet every single customer who walks through those doors. Every customer, without exception. You will not differentiate based on the color of their skin, the clothes they wear, or how they look. You will greet them all with a smile, with respect, and with courtesy. He looked directly into Dawson's eyes, his gaze unwavering. I want you to learn how to see people again, Mr. Dawson. Learn to see past the surface. Marcus took a step back, his voice lowering slightly but gaining an immense weight, delivering the core message of his decision, the profound irony that had brought them to this point. Because, he stated, his voice resonating through the hushed room, sometimes, the person you look down on the most is the very person who holds your fate in their hands. Dawson sat there, utterly stunned, the full implication of Marcus's decision washing over him. This wasn't swift, angry revenge. This was a calculated, public, daily requirement to confront the very biases that had dictated his actions. It was a painful, humiliating, but potentially redemptive path forced upon him. It was justice delivered not with a hammer blow, but with a mirror held up to the soul, one that he would be forced to look into every single day. Time, as it always does, continued its march. Westbridge Plaza, under Marcus Ryder's new management, underwent noticeable transformations. Stores were renovated, staff training improved, and a palpable shift in atmosphere began to take hold. One of greater inclusivity and genuine service. Not just superficial luxury, but the most striking visual, a daily, living reminder of the events that had transpired, was Sergeant Dawson standing by the main entrance. Initially, he stood there stiffly, his uniform slightly ill-fitting now, his smile strained and artificial. His eyes still held a flicker of resentment and profound embarrassment as he greeted a diverse stream of shoppers, teenagers in hoodies, elderly women in modest dresses, businessmen in suits, families of various ethnicities. He was the human embodiment of Marcus's lesson, forced to confront his own prejudices with every polite word, every forced smile. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, something subtle began to change within him. As he was forced to look into the eyes of countless individuals he would have previously dismissed or judged, As he received genuine smiles and polite thank yous from people of all backgrounds, the forced nature of his greetings began to fade. The smile became less rigid, more natural. The tension in his shoulders eased. He started to truly see the people walking past him, not as stereotypes, but as individuals with their own stories, their own reasons for being there. He was, in the most direct way possible, learning empathy. From a distance, sometimes standing near a large potted plant or just inside the entrance, Marcus would occasionally observe Dawson. Often, his father, Mr. Malcolm Ryder, would be by his side. There were no lengthy conversations, just quiet observation. Marcus would offer a small smile, a look that conveyed understanding and perhaps a quiet satisfaction at the slow, difficult process of change he was witnessing. Mr. Ryder would nod, a look of pride mixed with wisdom on his face, a silent acknowledgement of his son's unconventional, powerful approach to justice. This scene, replayed day after day, became a powerful testament to the story's core messages. It showed that true worth is not defined by appearance or social status. It is an internal quality, a matter of character and action. Sergeant Dawson, stripped of his power and forced into humility, was on a painful path towards rediscovering his own humanity by connecting with the humanity of others he had previously demonized. The story of Marcus and Dawson is a stark illustration of several timeless truths. Judging a person based on their outward appearance is the easiest path and the most profoundly misguided. It is a shortcut that leads only to misunderstanding and injustice, building walls where connections could be made. True power is not merely the ability to command wealth or authority, but the capacity to use that power not for destruction or simple revenge, but for transformation, for teaching, and for offering a chance at redemption, even to those who have wronged us. Prejudice is a blinding force, preventing us from seeing the inherent value and complexity in the people around us. Tearing down that wall of prejudice, brick by painstaking brick, is essential for building a more just, empathetic, and understanding society. And sometimes, the moment we are most completely humbled, most publicly exposed in our flaws, is precisely the opportunity we need to look inward, learn from our mistakes, and find a path towards making amends and becoming a better version of ourselves. It is the difficult, challenging road that can lead to the redemption we all, perhaps, deserve. As the final frame fades on Sergeant Dawson, standing at the entrance, a genuine smile finally gracing his lips as he greets a customer, we are left with the profound message. Sometimes, justice does not require a gun or a battle. It only requires the truth and a heart free of hatred. The story of Marcus and Dawson has concluded, but the lessons about prejudice, power, and the possibility of redemption linger. Compels us to reflect on how we perceive others in our own daily lives. Are we, perhaps unintentionally, erecting walls of judgment around ourselves? If this story resonated with you, if it sparked a moment of reflection, please like this video and share it with others so that this important message can reach a wider audience. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories of overcoming adversity, surprising twists of fate, and deep insights into the human condition and society. Let us strive to see the world through the lens of understanding, not prejudice. We look forward to seeing you in our next video.